We here at Bloomberg and investors so focused on the inversion of the yield curve, right? I just wonder, how important is this for policymakers such as yourself engaging the state of the economy, whether it's in Canada or around the world?
Well, I think we're much more likely to be looking at the fundamentals. So looking at the things that we think are going to make a big difference for investors that might make investments in the future in our country. And so from our standpoint, as we think about those fundamentals, we've got a very robust employment situation in Canada. And obviously, we're watching carefully to make sure that we see positive outcomes from the U.S.-China trade talks, which are, broadly positive for the economy and would be positive for Canada as well.
When would you expect some sort of deal on the China-U.S. trade agreement, and how beneficial would that be for Canada, given that these are the two biggest trading partners for your country?
Well, I don't have a crystal ball on the timing. I'm encouraged to see those conversations continuing, and obviously when you see that, you're hoping that there's going to be progress. My conversations with Stephen Mnuchin have helped me to keep informed on the fact that they are continuing those discussions. From our perspective in Canada, we see those as important, obviously, globally. We also are very keenly interested in how the USMCA gets ratified in the United States. And we're advocating to make sure that the steel and aluminum tariffs, which have been put on Canada under Section 232, are taken off, because we don't see those things as helpful to either economy.
Finance Minister, there's so much outside of our borders that not in your control, including, of course, those steel and aluminum tariffs, canola shipments to China being held up. In the budget that you tabled last week, there wasn't a huge sign that you're really reining in the spending with deficits in mind. You're still willing to run deficits. Is this the time, given that the state of the economy is pretty good, that you might want to introduce a little more fiscal prudence?
Well, Amanda, we actually see that the idea that we can continue to invest in ensuring that Canadians feel confident in the future is the right thing to do right now. And of course, as we think about our economic situation, we're always going to be fiscally prudent. So we did show in our budget that we're reducing the amount of our deficit as a function of our economy, reducing the amount of debt as a function of our economy, and putting ourselves in a good position. Being here in New York, of course, I'm reminded that as we show that we're going to a deficit that's 0.4% of GDP, the United States, in contrast, is going up to a deficit that's 5% of GDP. So it leaves us in a good fiscal position to deal with any potential challenges, but allows us also to continue to invest in the things that will give people confidence in the future.
And of course, one reason we so need that confidence is that our numbers look less positive on the household side, right? We lead the world by some measures on that front relative to GDP. What can you do to make sure that, as you talk about confidence, but that we grow the economy in a way that maintains jobs, but also wage growth?
Well, I think the best we can do is continue with what we've been trying to achieve in terms of unemployment rates, which has been very positive. The 900,000 new jobs we've created together with Canadians over the last 3 years have been a huge boost. And we're starting to see those wage gains that, of course, we really need to see. So last year was we saw wage gains that were better than we'd seen in about a decade. Obviously, what we're doing in our budget in 2019 is giving people confidence they can keep their skills up to date over the long term, which for them makes them more able to deal with the changing job market. For their employers means they're going to have more skilled employees. And I guess importantly, that means there's the potential for them to add more value and get paid higher. So these are all part of our long-term goal of making sure that people are doing well today and that they can face up to changes for tomorrow.
Unfortunately, of course, much of the global conversation about Canada lately has focused on the SNC-Lavalin scandal. Your government has been embroiled in that, probably an unnecessary distraction while you try to put a budget together. But what conversations are you having with people in places like New York when they talk about what's happening and about what might happen with SNC?
That's not I've been across Canada from coast to coast over the course of the last couple of weeks post-budget, and it's really not the main thing that people are talking about. They're very much talking about, how can we keep investing? What are the things we've done? Whether it be in the case of the training benefit I mentioned, or in how we can give people opportunity to get into housing. And similarly, when I'm here in New York, people are much more interested in how we're going to continue to be successful in Canada. They can see from the perspective of being outside of Canada that this discussion around SNC-Lavalin is one where we were fighting to make sure that we can have an economy that works and the jobs that work. But the broader issue is always going to be, how do we make sure that economy is working for Canadians?
How will Canada continue to be successful in an environment when you're battling the United States on the aluminum and steel tariffs, and at the same time, you're feuding with China over the arrest of Huawei CFO?
Well, I don't want to argue that it's easy. I mean, clearly we have to continue to engage at every level. I've been very engaged, as is my colleague Chrystia Freeland, to be looking at how we can move away from those steel and aluminum tariffs. We've been having very productive discussions. That's important. With respect to China, we're engaging at a diplomatic level intensely around the recent changes in canola, and we're gonna continue to work with our colleagues and our allies around overall trading issues between Canada, the United States and China.
On the same week that you saw these exports of canola oil halted to China, you had China buying $35 billion of Airbus jets. Are you concerned that Canada will lose a competitive edge against these other countries in luring China as an investor?
I think that we just have to be as engaged as we can be, trying to get through this difficult moment. I'm confident that over the long term that we will get to a position that makes more sense. We are, all of us, trying to make sure that we have a system that works, that we have the kind of relationship between Canada and China that works, and obviously foundational for us is getting through the USMCA ratification, the new NAFTA, and making sure we move away from the steel and aluminum tariffs.
The steel and aluminum tariffs, we're hearing from the Trump administration that they could be thinking of quotas. Would that be acceptable to you?
I don't want to get into the specifics of how we might get to a conclusion. Our view is that the tariffs in and of themselves don't make sense, that they were put in place on a security basis, which there's no security issue between Canada and the United States. We're great allies. So we don't think they make sense in their entirety, and we don't think they're helpful either in the U.S. or in Canada. So our premise would be that we should move away from those. And
Not
we
even
should get
quotas.
to, well, our rationale is the best one. Canada and the U.S. have a very balanced trading relationship in steel and aluminum. We should be able to continue in doing that.